Turns out I didn't do all that well at that stage of my life, but it started planting seeds in me about sales and this new environment and culture to come be a part of, where you are by default forced to grow. Yep. Otherwise, you won't survive.
This is the Just Real Quick podcast, where we discuss how to succeed in the world of sales through confidence, discipline, and consistency. Are you ready to be intentional about creating more opportunities that lead to sales? Tune into this episode right now for the latest insights and strategies that will take your sales game to the next level. I'm your host, Jefferson K. Rogers.
Welcome back to another episode of Just Real Quick. I'm your host, Jefferson Rogers. Today with me in the studio, got a good friend of mine, Mr. Jeff Fieldstad. Today we're going to be jamming on some cool stuff about sales, objections, mindset, some stuff that's going to help you level up in your sales career. Me and Jeff have both had our fair share of experiences inside of sales and overcoming objections and dealing with difficult people. And we want to teach you the tools necessary for you to be able to level up. Take something from today, apply it. Doesn't have to be everything. Apply one thing that you can take into your process and become a better salesperson on your way to becoming a world-class professional salesperson. So thanks for joining me, Jeffrey.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Let's jam on some sales today.
Okay, look forward to it.
So I come from very little experience in the financial services industry, but that's where I got my start. Yep. And it led me to believing that I was capable of doing more. And if these guys can do it, I know I can do it. It's just going to take me some time. And I started out like really rough around the edges.
Yeah, I think we both did.
And it was challenging. Like I had charisma and I had confidence, but for whatever reason, I thought that would translate into success in sales without needing to know important stuff. Yeah. Turns out it doesn't work that way.
No, not at all.
So what was your experience with that?
Yeah, I think that when I first got into sales, I've naturally always been the person where I liked people, but I'm a natural introvert, so I'm totally comfortable being in a crowd of people and never talking, right? Where I know you were a little bit different that way early on, where you were always more social than I was. But one of the things I think it helped me do is really pay attention. So I started learning in sales that if I could listen more than talk and then ask the right questions, a lot of the times these customers or anybody, because sales is going to help you in any area of life, but if we're talking about a customer in sales, that I could actually listen to the question, listen to their answer, ask a question, and really a lot of times know their response before I even ask the question. Which
Through
I think
a lot of repetition,
Yeah. So, I think it helped me a lot being an introvert more. So, and I think you'll see that a lot of times where people say, I don't know if I'd ever be good at sales because maybe I'm not this outgoing personality or I don't have a ton of charisma. I actually think you see a lot of very successful people in sales that didn't have that natural ability simply because they had to learn this skill. But we
just talked to one of them, Dave.
We did, yeah.
What a prime example.
Exactly.
Of somebody who's comes from just an average and ordinary background. He was an introvert, like an admitted introvert. But he just continued to put himself in difficult situations that he knew that he could overcome if he focused his attention there.
Yep.
And he became an incredible salesperson in his career with that company. And then he's gone on to take those skills and the confidence that he gained during that time to go do incredible things with his life.
Yeah, that's what I love about sales is sales isn't just going to help you make money, but it's also going to help you have better relationships with your spouse, your kids, your family. Yeah. And the people around you through the nature of the beast, right? Being able to ask questions, how to have effective communication.
That's what it is, a form of communication.
Yep.
So everything is sales and everything is also communication.
Yes.
Because that's another form of communication. As you level up as a communicator and you can negotiate, you got confidence, you can keep eye contact.
Yep.
Dude, that translates into everything.
It does. Body language, tonality. And so you start learning these things and it helps you, in whatever you do in life. And they become skills that in sales you're just used to. And then you go into a different avenue of life, whether it's with your kids or your family or maybe a social setting. And you realize that most people aren't really good at these things. And if you are really good at them, people notice you. And it kind of helps you separate yourself from the crowd. And I think that's where it gets special when you start to become a leader,
And it's the same thing applies to leadership. Like you take those things into other areas of your life, including your leadership journey.
Yep.
Like the things you learn in sales are so relevant when it comes to getting involved and started to impact people's lives and influence people's lives and be an example. And now everything that you've learned makes you uniquely qualified to lead those people in your own unique way.
Well, yeah, because isn't leadership really just selling people on themselves about them being good enough to do what they really want to do, right?
Great combination of building belief in people, inspiring people, having an influence over somebody's life because of the things that you've done and the presence that you have and the confidence that you have. They're even considering listening to you.
Yeah, they're allowing you to influence them because they know you're good at what they want to get good at, whatever that thing may be.
And it all starts with sales.
Yep.
And one of the things I love jamming on is the impact that sales has had on my life and the impact that I've seen it have on so many other people's lives. It came from an average background. Mm-hmm. My dad was a general contractor and a firefighter and a blue-collar, baddest mother effer you've ever seen. And I took a certain amount of skills from him. But as far as money and finances and business and communication, negotiation, my dad wasn't all that experienced with that stuff. So my gateway to get involved with that stuff and to find something that I saw in other people that I wanted for myself was sales.
Yeah.
And it started with Primerica.
Yeah.
And going to these meetings with people that were doing, like they're talking about stuff that I'd never heard people talk about.
Yeah.
They're like recommending books to each other and they're like talking about their financial goals. And it's like, I like this.
Yeah.
Turns out I didn't do all that well at that
at
that stage of my life, but it started planting seeds in me about sales and this new environment and culture to come be a part of where you are by default forced to grow. Yep. Otherwise you won't survive.
Yeah. Well, and the thing that I love about sales too in that aspect is it's very clear as you're increasing your skill set, the result. It's immediate when you're using sales as a career. So it's like, all right, I got good at this skill. The impact shows up in your numbers and your income, right? And so where most things, it's like if you want to become an athlete or something like that, it might take you a while to really start seeing the benefit of this increased skill. Where sales, you can go learn something today, go apply it today, get a result today, right? And that starts giving you power in your life because if you have these financial goals in your life, you want to make more money, then it's pretty simple. All right, I go, in this case, let's say knock X number of doors or do a certain amount of appointments and close a certain amount of sales. I know the direct result, what that is. So if I increase my skill set, then I can increase my effort and I have control over the outcome.
And what a powerful realization too, because I've heard you talk about this before and like there's these moments in your career where you realized that here's how much control I actually have. Like I know exactly what my numbers are.
Exactly.
And I can reverse engineer this thing to what my daily and hourly activity needs to be to be able to hit my goals.
Yep. Which is another habit we talked about, with Dave today he's talking about reverse engineering his life from his eulogy, right?
Yeah, crazy.
So it's a habit you learn in sales that is going to help you in every other part of your life being able to do that. So just one more skill set of why I think it's so important to learn how to become great at sales.
It is. You got to be intentional. So this applies to everything in life, but very important to remember that in sales, for you to level up, it's going to take you an awful long time if you're just going out there practicing on customers.
Yeah.
The best in the industry are the best at being intentional about leveling up in between. You don't practice. What did you say earlier about the game? You don't practice in the game.
Yeah, you don't practice in the game. You practice at practice.
You practice and practice. Like, can you imagine a professional sports team? Like, we're going to take this week off and rest and recover, and I heard that it's good for our muscles, and we'll just get back to it on the next game. Yep. No, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah, during the game, you're showcasing what you learned in practice. That's really what should be happening, right? So if you've practiced correctly, then the game is really just a showcase of the effort you've put in up to that point, right?
And you want to make some money, you want to change your life, you want to impact your family for generations, be that person. It's not unique to somebody else. It is possible for you, and both of us have been able to experience it in our own ways and be able to see so many other examples of those people that take some initiative, they do the extra time, they're asking questions, and they're very inquisitive, they're hungry to win, and they go and do the extra work in between. So when you show up at that next door, you've done the work and you're more confident. And you're almost developing like an intuition. You were talking about it earlier. Like you get so good with little effort that you almost develop an intuition and you know what's coming next.
Yep.
You can read their body language. You've seen this so many times. You've practiced it, drilled it, rehearsed it. You've done the role play with your team. It won't happen by itself, but when it does, you'll start to notice this new confidence and new ability to read situations that you never had before.
Yeah. Yeah, I also think as you say that, it's important when you're getting into sales. It's like I always use the analogy with golf. If you decide you want to start golfing and so you go out to the driving range and let's say you get out the driver and you hit the ball and it keeps slicing, right? And it keeps going to right. And you just say, well, I'm going to hit 100 balls. And so all you do is turn and turn and turn and whatever, and finally it starts going the right direction. Well, all you did is get really good at doing it wrong. You didn't actually make the adjustment. Versus if you get a coach or a mentor or someone that can help you make these small little adjustments, then you can go hit 100 balls and get really good at doing it right. And so I think in sales, it's important to know that you have to do two things. One is you have to get enough experience in a short amount of time to know what you need to work on. And then you need to figure out what are those things you need to work on. Get a mentor, get a coach, get a leader, someone who can help you. And then go get enough experience to apply those things to where you actually have learned them and get really good at doing it the right way versus just beating your head against the wall of doing more because someone told you. I tell people all the time, like, if you move faster in the wrong direction, you actually get further away from where you want to go.
Yeah.
And so if you're not getting the results you want to get, then you need to sharpen the saw, right? You need to get better at that.
How much of that did you do in your early sales career?
A ton, dude. I did a lot of things. Like we talked about this the other day. I told people, get rid of your televisions. That's because I did. I didn't have a television. I didn't listen to music or radio. I was listening to audios, and back then I started in sales in 2005, 2006.
They were cassette tapes.
Yeah, cassette tapes. So
being passed down from one of your mentors, huh?
Yep. And then CDs, so they're really YouTube and all this stuff didn't exist. Mm-hmm. So I was just listening to cassette tapes and CDs constantly in my car. So anytime I was driving to an appointment or driving home, and then at night, I was reading books, I was going to seminars. If someone was going to put on a sales seminar, I was there. And a lot of times, like I remember the first one I went to was a Tom Hopkins seminar. Yeah. And I didn't have the money, and they were doing it at a hotel, so I could register, but I didn't have the money. So I just slept in my car that night. So I went to the event during the day, slept in my car that night, and then got up and went to the event the next day just so I could be at the seminar that I knew was going to help me make more money, right? And so
learn the skills to help you make more money.
Yeah, I didn't want my lack of money to stop me from doing the exact thing that was causing me to not have enough money. So I wasn't going to let the problem continue to be the problem. I was going to find a solution so I didn't have to do that anymore. And that solution I knew was increasing my skills. Mm-hmm. So I needed to be at that event. I needed to be at the seminar so I could get better skills so I could make more money. So next time there was an event, I could actually pay for a hotel room,
That's so cool because I had a very similar story. Went to San Diego to a Tom Hopkins event and ended up having a family member that lived not too far away so I could go back and forth and I had a place to stay. But I was in a very similar situation. I drove my 1997 white Toyota Camry that I was scared to death wasn't even going to make it. Yeah. And for the same reasons, dude, I was just hungry. I wanted it. And for the same reasons that people watch a podcast like this to gain new awareness, a perspective, a blueprint on what's possible for them, and some things that you can do in your life. And a podcast is one of them. Yep. But if you really want to take it to the next level, surround yourself with other people that are operating at a high level. And it doesn't have to be where you're working. Like we both went out of our way and spent money that we didn't have to go do things to help us level up for our families and for ourselves. And honestly, if it wasn't for my family, I wouldn't have been doing that shit. Yeah. Like I was doing shit because I had some driving forces in my life. Yeah. That I was no longer going to tolerate the mediocre, the average, the going to an hourly job that was never going to get me anywhere. And you've got to be actively seeking the next level and putting yourself in these situations, surrounding yourself with great people, getting rid of the content that's not serving you and only allowing the content in your life, like seminars and books and podcasts. Yep. They're going to help you level up. Are you really taking it seriously? Like, ask yourself an honest question here. Because if you audit the things that you do with your time, just some of those examples that you gave, when you got buckled down and you were serious, I did the same thing. And it wasn't all that tactful either. It was just like, get them out of my way. Yep. I got something to accomplish with my life.
What always surprises me, how many people say they want to win and then they know who's winning in the NFL right now or the NBA, or they know the best players, but yet they don't know their scripts, or they don't know how to overcome the most common objections, or they don't know these simple things that they should know, or product knowledge. It's like, so how do you know what position this dude plays in the NFL and you know all his stats, but you don't know your products, or you don't know how to overcome objections better than anybody, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe if you invested some more time, because that dude in the NFL doesn't know you, your family, your goals, and really doesn't care for that matter, but yet you know all that stuff. So if you learn these scripts, you learn how to overcome objections, you learn product knowledge, you learn these things that are crucial for you to make more money, it does have an impact on your family. But watching the NFL or the NBA or whatever, having fun, it doesn't. It's not going to improve your life.
No, it sure feels good. And that's another example of, you hang around with 5 dudes that watch football on Sundays and they're inundated in fantasy football and knowing statistics. You're typically the 6th dude that's into that. And I was there at one point. I was excited to learn about football because these other guys I was hanging around knew football and I didn't.
Yeah.
But then the same thing happened when I started going to conferences and hanging around successful people. I started getting excited about things that they were interested in.
Yep.
And they didn't watch TV. Most of them didn't have TVs.
Yep. Well, it's the power of association versus the power of disassociation, right? So in your journey to success, if you want to win, you've got to learn to associate yourself with the right people, but you've also got to realize that disassociating yourself from certain things or people is just as important as associating yourself with the right ones.
Yep. Dave just said the same thing.
Yep.
About we all have some general idea, whether we write it down or we take it seriously or not, about the things that are important to us. But then what about the things that you shouldn't allow?
Right. Yep.
Like the non-negotiable things that you're not going to allow any space in your mind to be taken up by those things.
Yep.
Just as important as those other things.
And I think you have to predetermine those things in your life. And I think the reason why it's so important, especially in sales, because a lot of times people in sales have flexible schedules. And so what I would see early on is, like early on in my sales career, I had freedom to design my day however. And so I would have family come in town, or someone would need me to run an errand, or someone needed help moving or something like that.
Oh, yeah. And
they think because I didn't have this 9-to-5 job that I was available to help them. And then they would get mad if I said no. So and sometimes I would early on. I made this mistake early on in my career. They would call me and need help, and I love these people. So, I'll help them move. But then I had a mentor that said, listen, if you had a regular job, would you do those things? Well, no. Well, why not? Well, you get fired. Well, you're not going to get fired here, but you're definitely not going to make any money in close sales. Mm. So if you want to have the right results, you've got to do the right things. And so I had to pre-plan those things. It was like I scheduled them in my schedule. Here's what I'm going to do on a daily basis. And then something couldn't pop up. There was nothing going to come up. Something already came up. I scheduled it.
This is it. This is my schedule. Non-negotiable.
So I would go on my calendar, and for the next 90 days, all right, maybe I have a birthday or an anniversary or something that's very important to me. And it's like, all right, I'm going to take these times off. And then the rest of the time, I'm open for business. And one of the things I always taught people in sales is like, look, if you're competing, which a lot of us in sales are competitive, I think it's very good for people to compete, which is another subject we can cover later. But so competitive, I would tell people, like, if you take your calendar and you're going to take 10 days off this year, one of the ways that I can start beating you is by taking off less days, right? Mm-hmm. And so I would pre-plan that out, knowing that, all right, if my competition is going to take off the day before Thanksgiving, and the day after, well, if all I do is take a few hours off during Thanksgiving, then odds are I can win, mm-hmm. right? So I can start putting the odds in my favor on having success. And then you start winning some competitions, and it starts building confidence, right?
Absolutely. So build that momentum, your confidence. You're getting disciplined with what you're doing with your time, like most people aren't willing to do.
No.
And sometimes you can be doing 99% of everything right, but if you're missing some of these really simple concepts, like controlling your time, only allowing the positive content into your life, like writing out a vivid plan for yourself. Like, I mean, I don't think I was terribly vivid, but I'm a very visual person also, and I'm just like imagining all these things, because I would just do bullet points, and then I would just sit there and imagine myself accomplishing these things, mm-hmm. and like feeling the feelings of being the leader and making people feel like I wanted them to feel when I talked to them, instead of the way that I was doing it now. Just consistently, every level, you're visualizing, writing down your goals, and being intentional about what you want to create in your life.
Right. Well, and I think another thing is you were just saying that is when it comes to sales, you don't have to be the best. You just have to be the most consistent. So consistency wins long term. I tell people, a lot of times we're running week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year. Mm-hmm. And that's great. And I always say in sales, a lot of times our careers are series of sprints to a long-term marathon, right? So you got these like short checkpoints. So it might be, hey, I've got checkpoint. I'm trying to hit a goal for the week, right? And then if I'm consistent from week to week to week, then it's pretty predictable what I'll do for a month. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things I've told people is say, look, if you can have good days can turn into good weeks, and good weeks can turn into good months can turn into good quarters can turn into good years, and good years will change your life. Mm-hmm. And it all starts with that consistency on a day-to-day basis by having it planned out, knowing what you're going to do, and not getting distracted or letting something come up or enter into your schedule. And so that might be time for self-improvement. It might be time for increasing your skill set or going to a seminar or training. And then there's also got to be time for applying these things, right? When am I actually going to go, whether it's you're knocking doors, you're doing appointments, or you're overcoming objections, you've got to be putting and having the experience that it takes in a short enough amount of time to really start getting good at something.
Yeah, you got to have the actions to back it all up. Because there's this combination of things that you've got to have, and you can start small and build on it because you got to put your goals down.
Yep.
And then they're only wishes if you're not taking action on them. So then you have to put a detailed plan together on how you reach those goals, and then you got to take action. So that the missing component that a lot of people miss is the action, the consistent action that's applying all the skills that you've developed, the practice that you put in, and now you've got to go get in the reps.
Well, and I think when you say action, it's not, and I think this is important for people to understand, it's not just action, but it's enough action in a short amount of time. Mm-hmm. And so like a few examples I would always use, one is like a bullet. You ask someone like, what makes a round of ammunition deadly? And there's all these different answers you get, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you get, it's the slug, or it's the casing, or, but it's not really. It's the gunpowder in a confined space where the firing pin strikes it, ignites the powder, and it creates so much pressure that the slug leaves the rifle or whatever you're shooting fast enough to make impact, right? Mm-hmm. And it's all because of that confined pressure. When I was in high school, I would do blasting, which was a lot of fun, where you drill holes in the ground and, you have to blow up rocks so they could dig it. Yeah. And we would get these boxes of dynamite because they would drill a bunch of holes. We'd get boxes of dynamite and we'd be throwing it, to each hole. And people would be freaking out because they'd be walking by and see we have boxes of explosives.
Like treating it like candy.
Yeah.
Just throwing it around.
And I would tell people it's not a big deal. It's really not that big of a deal. I mean, you don't want to be holding it if it goes off, but it's really just a giant firecracker. What makes it deadly is once we put it in the ground and then we put diesel fuel, or what we call Perel, and then we pack that hole full of rocks. And then when you pack the hole full of rocks, the dynamite ignites, lights up the diesel fuel, the Perel, which creates heat and creates expansion. Well, it can't escape because of all the rocks. And because of that is the pressure. So what people want to do in sales is they want to get enough activity in a short amount of time so they can create an explosion. Right? It's like if you're going to go fly a plane, I think a plane has to go 188 miles an hour to take off, right? Not 180. I'm pretty sure it's 188, right? And I know weight has an impact.
Yeah.
But if we use that number, you say, would a pilot sit there and go, hey, I'm doing 170 miles an hour down the runway. Something's wrong. We're not taking off. Well, yeah, what's wrong is you're not going fast enough. You're not doing enough. But once you get it up in the air, now you can fly the plane. And I think sales is very similar to that. It's like you have to do enough in a short amount of time. You have to get going fast enough to where you can actually get it off the ground and then start making adjustments in your career.
Absolutely. And that's why over time you saw that happen in people's careers, and you created things that would help people get that success early on with enough experience and time under their belt where it could create that explosion in their, like, there's all these things that are tied to it. Because not only are their abilities increasing during that time, but think about all the other impacts that it's having on their life and their confidence, their momentum, all this inertia that you created by getting it done quickly.
Yes, exactly. Well, and I think it's important because as people's belief starts going naturally, as your belief goes up, your results go up. And if your results go up, usually so does your effort. You know, one of the things I would tell people all the time is like, I lived in Las Vegas for 10 years. And people say, oh, do you gamble? And I go, no, right? I don't like poker. I don't. And it's not because I disagree with gambling or whatever, but it's like, I'm just not good at it.
Yeah.
But I'm not good at it because I didn't put any time in it. But I'm sure, like I had this guy in my business one time, he made millions a year playing poker. And I would always tell him he's going to gamble. He goes, no, I don't gamble. Like, that's not what I do. I play the odds.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking how much it changed me because I know if I go play poker, I dislike it because I'm not very good at it. So I usually what?
It's more like gambling for you.
I lose.
Yeah.
Right? And if I lose, it sucks. But if I was really good at it, like I got good at sales, and I know like, okay, I'm good at this, I get a result, I make some more money, which gets me closer to my dreams, which makes me want to put more time and more effort and more energy.
So it became predictable for him because
Yes.
he knew the odds.
Yeah, and for me in sales, which made me fall in love with it. But it sucked at first because I sucked.
Yeah.
Right? So I tell people, you're never going to love something that you're not great at. You're just not. You fall in love with things that you get really good at, you know? And so by putting time and effort and energy, like in sales, initially it might be really hard. It might be really uncomfortable. It was for me because I just was naturally not this outgoing person. But the better I got at it, the more skill set, the more abilities, the more belief that I had, I naturally started falling in love with this thing that started changing my life. And it was all I wanted to do. So I don't want to do anything else.
But as part of the sequence that led you to that place where you could start to love it, because I experienced something similar in door-to-door sales. I mean, it's not fun.
No.
And if you're not mentally stable, if you can't have a good attitude, it makes it even worse.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about today was the path that we can help people understand that they need to take to get to that level where they can truly start understanding it, and how things like being able to overcome objections and be comfortable in uncomfortable situations, and to be able to lead people to a decision that you know is right for them, how all of those things grew and developed you into a place where you could truly enjoy what you were doing.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think a couple of things that people need to remember. All overcoming objections, sales, closing, all it really is asking the right questions. Right? So if you learn how to ask the right questions, which people say, I just don't know if I could ever be good at sales. And it's like I know you were a mechanic, right? Mm-hmm. And you could teach me how to become a mechanic if I was willing to learn. But I don't know anything about it. Like, still, at this point in my life, if I want oil change, I take it to the dealership. Like, you know I could change my oil if I
could learn
had
how to
someone
do it.
to teach me, right? Mm-hmm. YouTube or something, right? But you could no doubt teach me if you wanted to, mm-hmm. right? And it would just take time and effort and someone who knew what they were doing. Well, the difference between being a mechanic or being great at sales is just words. It's just learning how to ask the right questions, mm-hmm. responding to the answers correctly, and then managing my emotions through that process. And anybody can learn to talk. So the thing I love about sales, I'm like, I don't care where you come from, what your personality type is, anything. I can teach you how to say the right words. The only thing I can't teach somebody is their desire. So you show up with your desire, I can teach you everything else you need to know. That's the one thing I can't teach you. So as long as you come with desire, everything else is golden, right? You just got to be willing to show up with the desire to learn. And I can teach you how to ask the right questions, teach you how to overcome objections, teach you product knowledge. I can teach you all of these things to be mega successful. You know.
Yep, that is an interesting, really simple perspective on things. Yeah. Like the principles are so easy.
They are.
When you think back on them, and that's the power in the repetition of understanding these philosophies is really important here, because when I first started hearing these things, even though they were simple, they were going over my head. And I was just trying to focus on what's the next thing for me right now? Like, I understand Jeff is very eloquent about the way that he explains these things. But for some people in the process right now, there's things going over your head and you're like, what do I start on right now? Some of us need things really simplified so we can have action steps today that we can take.
And I think that's important. But and just remember, the things that are easy to do are also easy not to do, right? So even though it might seem like, oh, that's so easy, it's so simple. Okay, well then make sure you do that. Uh-huh. Make sure you do not skip that thing, whatever that is in sales, right? So I think that's important. And for me, like, I wanted to learn a couple of things early on that really helped me, and that was asking the right questions, right? And so I really started learning some fundamentals like, all right, if I'm going to ask the right questions, then what are the wrong ones? And I think that's a simple answer. And the wrong question is a question you really don't know the answer to. Because if you don't know what they're going to say to a question, if you don't know their answer, then you're never going to have a response.
An intelligent response.
Yeah.
So that's the important thing, is that you're learning the questions to ask, but then you also got to be equipped to be able to answer those questions.
Exactly. Right. Well, and not only that, like I learned, some important things like a porcupine is like a sales. I don't know if you ever.
The porcupine close, right?
Yeah, porcupine is just asking a question that is an answer to somebody else's question. So somebody asks you, "Hey, how's the weather?" I mean, I thought it was beautiful out there. What did you think? Right. So now it's like I can answer, but I can still keep control of the conversation by asking you another question. Where I think what a lot of salespeople do is someone might make a statement or ask them a question. Hey, how's the weather? Oh, it's beautiful outside. Okay, now what? And these are also conversation skills in anything. So whether it's prospecting for a new client or just meeting somebody for the first time on the door or sitting at the kitchen table trying to build rapport.
Yes.
So for me, like the first thing I wanted to learn was, okay, I need to get good at asking questions. It's the most important tool for communication is the quality of questions. I've always told people the quality of your life will be in direct proportion to the quality of questions you ask yourself, most importantly, and then the quality of questions you ask others, right? And so I knew I needed to get good at asking questions, and so I started learning some fundamental things that I could practice. So one of them was a porcupine. So if my wife would ask me a question, I started practicing answering her question with a question so that I could get good at it. So then if I'm on a kitchen table appointment, I'm sitting down with a client and they ask me a question, my natural tendency would be what? Make a statement. But if I'm practicing with my wife or I would do it with people on my team, I would naturally respond to their question with a question.
It's such a cool skill to have, and it can be applied to a lot of things, because you can also, I'm sure one of the things that you notice throughout your career is that you were, without putting a little bit more emphasis on it and creating uncertainty, you were asking questions earlier in your process that were helping them make decisions that you knew you were really likely to run into in the way of their concerns and objections.
Well, exactly, because one of the things I learned early on in my career is that people will never call themselves a liar. So if I ask them questions up front that put them into a place where I know the question I'm going to ask them at the end is going to get their answer to be what I really want them to say yes to. So when I get to the end and say, hey, well, you said this made sense for you earlier, right? Right. Well, perfect. I have the solution for you. Because really, I think what a professional salesperson is not somebody trying to sell something to somebody that they don't want or need. Rather, it's providing them a solution to something that offers them value that they've procrastinated or never met a professional up to this point who could actually help them find that solution.
Exactly.
So when I went into their home, I wanted them to know that I have the solutions. Well, in order to know their problems, I have to ask. If I don't ask, I can't find out the real problems. So the more information I have about what their problems are, the higher the odds that I have the solution or I can find the solution to their problem and I can be the resolution. And if I can, I get paid, right? Because that's what people do. They get paid for solving other people's problems, right?
It is. And the better you are at solving problems, the more money you make.
Exactly.
In volume or in bigger problems.
This is in anything in life.
In anything.
Like if you have a job and you're there to solve an employer's problem, that's because they need a job done. And if you don't do that job, they get rid of you and find someone else who does. So you still have to solve a problem. The difference at a job and in sales that I love is a job you're kind of like, all right, here's what you're going to get paid, and you kind of know. It's predictable. Next week, next month, next year is pretty predictable. Where in sales, it's like, well, if you want to make more, just go do more. So
easy as that.
It's awesome.
Do more, get better.
Yep.
That's as easy as it is in sales. And one of the things I want to point out is you were going through that. I know that there's a lot of different industries and people listen to this podcast and they do many, many different things, sell many different products. not all of them are as excited or convinced that what they're doing brings value. So it makes it harder to have that kind of conviction in your approach, that you're trying to flush out these things that are going to relate to their situation by asking those questions, knowing like wholeheartedly, because of your experience and the amount of times that you've seen this impact people's lives, that this makes sense for them. Yeah. And it's your job as a professional salesperson to flush out the reasons why, to get them emotionally connected to making this decision right now.
Exactly. Well, and I think that comes back to product knowledge. Like, what are you selling? Like, what is the value of the product? Because if it's an industry, there's tremendous value. That's why there's an industry built around this product. There's a reason you're here in this industry, whatever it is, whether it's Windows or financial services or real estate or whatever somebody is selling, there's an industry. I mean, we've met people from all different industries, right? Yep. And they sell the most random things and make a ton of money doing it, right? Like I always joked around and said, there's somebody out there right now making a fortune selling golf tees. Like someone's doing it, right? And is it like, how do you really get passionate about a golf tee? Well, yes, some people do. Why? Because it is a solution to someone's problem. Like anybody ever been golfing? No, you need a tee, right? And so all you need to do is find out like, what are the benefits of your actual product or service? Some people sell a service. So if you have the benefit of your product or service, then it's a lot easier to find out where is the problem in somebody's life that this product or service can solve.
And you got to resell yourself. You read Sell or Be Sold, didn't you?
Yep. It's funny, it's on my desk right now. I was going to bring it today for this podcast.
It's such a...
Interesting you mentioned that book.
One of my favorite books ever, because it came at a point in my life where I was struggling with that. Like this exact scenario that we're talking about here, the belief that you need to have, that you got to resell yourself on every day as a salesperson. You're starting over, and your mindset and your attitude in those individual interactions determines, along with the skills that you've developed and the questions that you asked, the success rate that you'll have.
Well, think about what you just said. Like, you got to resell yourself. And what is that ultimately? It's the questions you're asking yourself about what you're doing for other people, right? The questions you're asking yourself about how good can you be? How great can you get at this thing? That's what we run. Most salespeople wake up in the morning, we get in the shower, we're like, man, am I good enough? Can I do this? What am I thinking? And we start playing these questions in our minds. What I think changes everything is when those questions change. How many sales am I going to make today? How many people am I willing to talk to today? Man, how many good days am I going to have? Who am I going to meet today? These questions start changing in your mind, and all you did is reframe what you used to think. And a lot of times that just comes through experience, being intentional with your goals, learning the products or services.
And being aware.
And getting some results. Yep.
Man, you got to be aware of that narrative that's going on in your head, because that is maybe the biggest contributor to people not becoming successful, is because they've been around people that aren't successful.
Yep.
It becomes a reality for them. They're asking questions, but they're asking the wrong questions.
Yep.
And when you can shift that and become aware of the questions that you are asking and how it's affecting your activities and your habits and your disciplines, you're asking the questions that are the opposite of what mediocre people do to keep them stuck. And sometimes it's a controversial thing to talk about, but for heaven's sakes, like, you have control over this. There's a couple things you have direct control over: what you do with your free time and what you do with your thoughts to help you move in a different direction, build more belief, build more skills.
Well, it's like when you think about questions, like, what is the most common question people ask in sales to themselves? What if it doesn't work? Right? What if this doesn't work? And so I've always just said, but what if it does?
Just flip it. Like every single one of them that's negative, you could flip it.
What if it does work? I have a whole talk on this. I used to give a talk, and in this talk, I would say, think about Steve Jobs talking about selling a phone with no buttons. Like a phone with no buttons. Like, and people say, you're crazy. You're selling this overpriced device, and it doesn't even have a button. And people are going to talk or text more than talk? Like, no way. This is unheard of. You say, but what if it doesn't work? And all Steve Jobs would say was, well, what if it does? And his response was, if it does work, I can put a dent in the universe.
Yeah.
So he was thinking about finding solutions to the thing that he really wanted to accomplish. So in our lives, we got to start asking ourselves these questions, because if we ask ourselves, what if it does work? Then we'll start finding a solution, which is the next customer, the next client, the next close, the next appointment. whatever it may be, right? Like I remember early on in my career, I would have appointments set and they would all blow out, and I'm like, man, I don't have any appointments tonight. Now what? Like, can I even do this? Like, what's going to happen? Then you start stressing out, especially if you're new. You're like, man, am I going to make enough money? What's going to happen? And you start playing these videos in your mind, right? So then I got to a place where I said, you know what? I'm in control of two things, my attitude and my activity. So I can control how I feel about this, and I can control how much activity I create. So if I'm in control of my attitude and my activity, that could be the what comes first, chicken or the egg philosophy. Do you have a good attitude, create activity, or if you have great activity, create an attitude? I don't think it matters as long as you do both.
Applies both ways.
Right? So I started saying, you know what? I'm going to have so many appointments going that I'm going to be the cancelor, not the cancelee. So if anything's getting canceled on, I'm doing the canceling or I'm doing the rescheduling.
Because you got too much.
Because I have so much going on. So then it went from like, oh my gosh, I don't have anything going on to, oh my gosh, how am I going to handle all this? And that's how I started moving into leadership.
And you start showing up differently also.
Yeah.
There's more urgency. You're not desperate like you heard about like sales breath and stuff like that. When you're
desperation,
you're freaking coming across different to people.
Yep.
But when you put these things in motion for yourself, start to build momentum, take control, line out your day with the daily activities, the habits, the actions that are necessary to reach your goals. This stuff it can become predictable for you.
Yes. Well, and what's exciting about predictability is then you can start making adjustments. You like think about Formula One just happened in Las Vegas. And these guys are driving 200 miles an hour through Las Vegas.
Crazy.
Right? And really the biggest thing that's making the difference is they're making small little adjustments. But to get to that place where they could race in a Formula One, they started racing go-karts at 4 years old.
Yeah.
And so they've gone through all these little phases. Now, if you've seen a grown man in a go-kart racing, it would look funny. But if he has a dream to race, that's where he's got to start still. Yeah. It still works that way. You don't put, just because he wants to race Formula One, you don't just put some inexperienced dude in a Formula One car. He's got to start in a car, right? So it doesn't matter where you start. What matters is you understanding that once you start building these skills, you have the right attitudes, you've got the right mental toughness, and you get to a place, then you can start making these fine-tuned adjustments, which are going to have a tremendous amount of impact on your career. And these are the guys we look at in sales, like, how are they so good without even trying? Well, you just didn't see them when they sucked. You just didn't see them when they were going through all this. So now they put in all these years, and you're seeing a finished product, right? Which really is not finished, but you get the point, right?
Yeah, you're seeing an advanced version.
Yeah.
We were talking to Dave about that and who he was at 16 years old, moving out of his house, inexperienced from a small town. We've got similar stories, But there's some commonalities that you can develop. Just because you have an upbringing and you have a current belief system and habits of thinking doesn't mean you have to keep those habits of thinking.
Right.
You can ask better questions. Like, first of all, why not you? Those guys that are having success that why not you? Like, literally, look at them. Pay attention to what they do. They're more experienced. They've been doing it for longer. And the one thing that they all have in common is they believed that they could do it.
Yep.
And it may not have been easy, and most of the time it's not, but they believed that they could do it. And then they went out and they took action, and they kept a good attitude, and they kept replaying all these questions in their head. Some of them are negative. You develop an ability to tune out the bullshit and ask yourself better questions consistently. Days turn into weeks, turn into months, turn into years. And you want to do something special with your life? It's consistency, man.
Yep. Dude, you string a couple of good years together, it's game over in sales. Like, you can do some amazing things you string a couple of years together. But it starts with just a couple of good days and just being consistent, And that's, I just wrote down here, managing expectations and managing activity. And if you manage the expectations about what's supposed to happen today, you manage the activity of how much you have going on today, then you can start making these adjustments and actually what you need to work on. It says, like, what objection did I get that I fumbled today? Mm-hmm. But if you don't really have an expectation of getting better and you get an objection and you didn't close the sale and your expectation is just, that's what happens. I just go knock on another door or I just go do another appointment.
Which is what most people do, yeah.
It is. And yes, you need to go knock on another door. Yes, you need to knock on more.
But they're not more prepared.
Exactly. But you got to figure out, why didn't you overcome that objection? You know, one of the things that used to drive me crazy too, early on in my career as I got into leadership, is if you've done a presentation 1,000 times, you pretty much know the 10 objections that presentation causes. And usually they're intentional based on the psychology, right? And so you're going to ask a question, you're going to have tie downs, and you're going to have certain questions in your presentation. They're going to evoke a certain response, and it's usually intentional. So then I would train these salespeople, and they would call me and say, hey, I got this objection. It would be something like off in left field. And I'm like, what? Like, they don't say those things. And I'm like, okay, do your presentation. I would do their presentation. I go, oh, well, that's why you're like way off. Like, you're so far off the script.
You created that thing.
Yes. So, and I think one of the things that is important to not let happen to you in sales is let previous situations have you change the system of what you've been taught by successful people. Because
overcomplicate it.
Yes, because they had a previous experience, and so then they changed the presentation because of the previous experience, and then they're starting to get weird objections.
Which only applied to that one person.
Yes. And now nobody knows how to coach them through that because they don't ever get that because they just stuck with the system, right? So I would help people what to say. They would call me, and then I would say, okay, you got this objection. Here's what you say. And they would say, that's what I already said. I'm like, no, you didn't already say that. Otherwise, you would have closed the sale. Like, it works, you know? And so if you've had enough experience, so I think it's important to know, like, all right, if you know your numbers, you know, you go on X amount of appointments, you're going to close X amount of sales. Yesterday, we were talking about ratios. Every business has a ratio, right? And for me, I always want to know those ratios so I can manage expectations. I don't expect anybody to close 100%. But if the average is 50 or 60, then I expect you to at least be average. You see what I'm saying?
We've got very predictable numbers to know.
So if you did 10 appointments and you closed 5, great, you're average. Now we can help you get better. So what are some things maybe on tonality or these different, maybe small things that people can't see? But if you closed 1 out of 10, now we've got a problem, right? Now we go, okay, what is it? And so it's probably the questions you're asking or not asking. Maybe you've changed your presentation. Maybe you've done different things that you don't even realize. And that's why it's so important, I think, to always have a mentor or a coach that can help guide you, that you seek out.
Yes. Because sometimes you can't, like how many of those conversations that you had with people, they literally thought that they were doing the right thing. And they're so far out in left field that this is what's causing it. But from an outside perspective, it's easy to see. And sometimes you can't see past your friggin' nose.
That's where the saying comes from. You can't see the forest of the trees, right? You're just too close to it sometimes.
I know I had to go through that a lot on my own. And that's why it's so important to have people in your corner, to have a community to be a part of. And you're watching your numbers and holding yourself accountable and asking the questions and getting the help. Because last thing you want to do is do another 1 by 10 next week.
Yeah. Have enough humility to ask questions. Like, there's nothing wrong with making a mistake. There's everything wrong with making a mistake without trying to get better, right? If you just continually make it, you don't ask for help, you're not trying to get better. Well, that just seems dumb, you know? But if you make a mistake and you want to get better, but you're not asking a question and you're not asking for help, well, that's dumber. You know what I mean? So I think it's important to humble yourself enough, like, hey, I'm making this mistake. What do I do? And the thing I've learned about successful people in any sales business, there's always the most successful people are the ones willing to help the most.
They are.
And
people are just scared to ask.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up here, listen, you guys, you got to be intentional about this. Nobody's going to do it for you. There is no easy button. There's a reason why we talked about these things today, because we want to help you develop the skills to change your life, to increase your ability to make income to such a level that you can never be the same. You'll never look at what you do the same or your earning capabilities ever again the same as you used to, because of the level that you've reached as a professional salesperson, the impact that you can make on people's lives, how many people you can help. But it takes being intentional about it. You got to do the work. You got to put in the hours. You got to go get in the reps with people to practice the things that you just put in that time on for it to be able to impact, and watch it affect the rest of the areas of your life in leadership, communication, your opportunities with partnerships and investments. incredible, but nobody's going to do it for you.
Yep. And you don't want them to do it for you. You don't get strong by watching someone else lift weights. You know.
I know there's a lot of people watching that are in a position right now where they're not all that proud of it. I've been there myself, but you have to take the initiative. For things to change, you literally need to change. Like, you can't be the same person and have this.
Exactly.
It's just, it doesn't work that way. And once you can come to terms with that, the work that's going to have to be involved, you want to change your life, you have to take control and go do it. Thank you guys for checking into another episode of Just Real Quick. Keep coming back for more every week. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe and leave us a review. Tell us what you think about the podcast. Share it with somebody who you think needs to hear this. Today was a great message from an absolute expert when it comes to sales and leadership and training and developing systems. There's a blueprint inside of here that can help change your life. All you got to do is be intentional about it. Take the notes, start applying something simple today that can help change the trajectory of your life. And check in next week because we'll keep bringing more of it.
Appreciate you having me today.
Thanks, brother. See you guys next time. Later on.